August 23rd, 2011 was absolutely the hardest day of my life. It's the day that I had to confess to my husband of 15 years that I had been unfaithful.
Today, we just want to invite our listeners into that story and just let you be a part of what went on that day that was back in 2011. You know, as I've been thinking about this, I have thought about, we've told this story so many times, and it's really your story because I was not a part of the story leading up to confession and even to the moment of confession. And that's when basically I was invited into the story, and then it became our story. So I just wanted to start just with you, setting the stage. Like, what led up to that moment of confession? What happened before it? Not days and weeks and months before it, but like the immediate before. What led to it? How did you get to that place?
I think that, in all honesty, when I look back, I wasn't anywhere close to confession on my own. I wasn't at a place where the Lord was whispering to me, hey, you need to end this and there needs to be confession. I'm sure that he was, but I was ignoring that with everything I had. And so I wish that part of my story was that that's when God broke me and I confessed to you and asked for forgiveness, but it wasn't. I was called by the wife of the other man who said, I know what's going on. I've called it, I've seen it, and you have 24 hours to tell Rusty or I will. So I knew that if I was going to be the one to tell you, that I had to do that quickly. So you were at a meeting, and I knew that you would be back late that night. And I think the hours that led up to that, of course, were just filled with anxiety and nervousness of fear of what my future was going to look like. When I look back at those moments and hours before you came home, I think I was just really spiraling into how am I going to keep my world from exploding? Are we going to be able to keep this a secret? Are we going to be able to heal? I, of course, thought about our boys that were asleep in their rooms. Like, how is this going to affect them? And basically, I was thinking that as long as nobody else found out, I thought we would be okay. She had told me that they didn't want it to be public. And so the idea was I was going to tell you and we were going to heal in private. So the moments before you came home, and even I can remember the garage door going up, and as the garage door went up, my heart just started beating faster and faster and faster. And of course, you came in not knowing anything was coming, and so you're telling me about the meeting and how that went, and I was in our bedroom, and when we were talking, and I said, "Hey, I need to talk to you," and you of course, were like, "Okay, what's going on?" And I knew you were not feeling the severity of that, so I again said, I need to talk to you because I've messed up. And I can remember you had a somber look on your face, like, okay, this is something that's big, but I still didn't think that you understood the weight. And honestly, thinking back, I was scared to death to just say it. So I felt like if I said enough times, I've messed up, and then I said it again, I've messed up real bad. I was hoping that you were going to come to the conclusion on your own, because I wasn't owning what I did. Like, I just was hoping you would just guess. And so when I said, I've messed up real bad, I could see on your face that you knew what was coming, but you didn't let me off very easily, and you just stood there. You could have easily said, have you been unfaithful, or did you have an affair? But you didn't. And I'm thankful that I kind of had to own it. That was the first time I think that I felt the weight of what I had done, but it was really just the weight of I got caught. There was no weight of sin at that point. It was just the weight of being caught and the effects that was fixing to have. And honestly, it was the loss of what I had been doing, because I knew that was going to be over. So it was heavy on a lot of accounts. And so I did. I said, I have been unfaithful. I had an affair. And of course, your first question was who, and just to try to make sense of it all. When I look back at that confession, there was no remorse in it. Like, I didn't even cry. I think it was just fear. It was all wrapped up in fear of what my life was going to look like next, because I was losing a part, because I was caught and didn't get to I didn't break on my own. There wasn't a confessing heart behind it. It was just facts. Sorry. It was just facts. It was, this is what I did, and I have to tell you. And so when I look back on it, honestly, it's heartbreaking to think about where my heart was in that moment.
So I'm going to tell kind of what my day was like and sort of where I came into the story. But before I do that, like, I want to ask a couple of questions that maybe our listeners want to hear or would be interested in, just to help make a little more sense, because these are things that I'm not sure I've ever asked you. I mean, it's not a lot and it's not anything hard, but I asked so many questions early on, but some of them just weren't important. There were obvious questions that were much bigger, and as we went along through the healing process, I realized I didn't really need all of the details. Mm-hmm. And so some things we've never really, just talked about in complete detail. But first of all, it can't be easy. I mean, we've told this story a gazillion times, and we don't walk away from it with just this awful feel. Like, people I know are listening going, how do y'all keep telling, like, how do you revisit that? Mm-hmm. And I think it's just because we have completely found this message and this ministry in our mess. And to embrace that and to see what God has done, we're just okay with it. And not okay with what happened, but we're just okay with how this has played out in our lives, because God is so incredibly big and performed a miracle. But I know it's hard. It's still hard for you to share the story. And so on behalf of the people that listen and watch, I want to say thanks for just being vulnerable, because it's not easy and most people would never do that. Now, when you started off talking about how it came to happen, like, that that was a phone call, a personal phone call that came to you on that day. So literally the day before, 24 hours before confession, you were just living in this fantasy world
Yeah.
of basically living two lives.
Two separate lives.
And then in an instant, it was, I got caught, and now everything's about to change.
And both lives were fixing to completely change, both of them, because there was a loss of that relationship because I knew that was over. And then my relationship with you was fixing to change dramatically.
Now, we always are really careful just because we don't want to romanticize the details. Like it's never about that, but there's an obvious reason why we tell the story and why we give as many details as we can, because there's people out there that are living this story.
That's right.
And so for us to be able to give as much insight as we can, it's helpful in some ways. I'm sort of curious when, like, the conversation that you had with the wife, like, how long did this conversation last?
Not long.
Like, and when it was, I mean, I hate to say it like this, but when you saw the phone pop, when the number popped, I mean, what even went through your head? Like was it an immediate, oh, that's it?
Yeah, I think so. Well, I say that, but I answered the phone like, hey,
Okay.
Like
Yeah.
maybe she doesn't know.
Okay.
But I think deep down it was like, yeah. Here we go.
And like, what caused her to find out?
Well, she caught us in communication through an app, a gaming app that we were playing back and forth. And that's how we were communicating. So you could play this game back and forth, the Words with Friends game, but you could talk in the background. So we weren't talking through text message, we were talking through that game. And she just had her suspicions that something was going on, is what she said. And so she was able to log in to that same gaming account on an iPad and read everything that we had ever talked about.
Well, and I think that's important. And the reason why is because just for people to be sensitive, when as we get into it and start talking more about our healing process, boundaries were such a huge thing, and we didn't have those. And so, the lack of boundaries led to that type of vulnerability and just being susceptible to the enemy. And so those are things that that you just have to be really careful about.
And the enemy can use innocent things.
Oh, absolutely.
For bad.
Absolutely.
So, like, you're thinking...
Because it certainly started.
Yeah.
It wasn't like you got together and was like, hey, let's play this game so that we can communicate secretly with each other.
It was completely the opposite. It was just a gaming, and then just, hey, how are you? How was your day? Things started, going back and forth with personal things.
Right.
And so that's how the intimacy started and the building of that.
Right. Now, I may be way off base, and again, a lot of the details that we talked about, for many, many years ago, I don't remember exactly, but I feel like there was someone in the community that may have alerted her, and I may be wrong. Like somebody said, hey, I feel like even at the gym, like somebody said, I feel like there's a little bit too something going on that's too close. And that may have led her to start looking into it.
And honestly, I don't know if that was, hey, look into this, or if it was, oh, I knew something was going on once it came out. And I honestly don't remember. I would tell you. I know that was part of the story, that somebody said, oh, I could tell at the gym that something was going on. Like it was off.
Right.
But I don't know if that person said, hey, this is happening, or, oh, I knew that was happening.
I gotcha. Well, I feel like, you have certainly shared about the day and leading up to it. And I mean, can you just for a second add anything? There had to have been, I'm just throwing something out, 10 hours, 12 hours between the time that you found out I've got to confess and then it actually happened. I mean, what? Like, how can I don't know. How can you how can you even live through those 10 hours or whatever?
Well, I do know, and if you know our story at all, not you, our listeners.
I know it. I know it.
If you have been a part of our story for a while, you know that brokenness came about a week later. So in this time of confession, I was just trying to keep things from unraveling. I was so worried about my reputation and our reputation, my boys' reputation, which, praise the Lord, they were at an age where it didn't affect them like it could have. But I was so, I was living in complete sin, and I was living in a fantasy world that I was in control. And so even through confession, I felt like I could control it. I felt like, yeah, he's going to be mad, but I can keep things from unraveling. I can keep these things. I was more concerned about the other people. Like, I was like, what if she can't control this? Like, what if she can't control her mouth? Or what if she tells people? Like, I felt like my side of the world, even though I was fixing to experience loss, I didn't think it was going to be out of control. And so it was, even though there was fear, and I mean, I was shaking and I was nervous and I was really scared of how you were going to react. I mean, you are such a calm presence, but I was like, he's going to lose his mind. And so, I didn't know how you were going to react. So that was fearful, but I really did not feel out of control at this point in the confession.
Did you talk to anybody at all during those hours?
No.
So, well, and that even in itself is, I love what you're saying and how you're just explaining this false sense and belief. And again, it's the enemy speaking to you saying, oh, you got this. You got this. It's not a big deal. And
what you did was not that bad.
Right. And not even because you weren't feeling the weight of it, you had no idea that, like, the enemy saying it's no big deal, when in reality it was the biggest deal that had probably ever happened in your, or it had ever happened in your life and my life. And so, for me, that day looked very different. And again, we look back on hindsight because we have that ability now. And leading up to that day, and I won't go into a lot of details, but the ministry that I was a part of, and I'm the executive director of a ministry, and it's a nonprofit, and the finances were hard. And I mean, it just always is, raising money. And that was a season where, for whatever reason, financially, we were not blessed. And, I have my own thoughts about it now. And some of it I do believe is what was going on in our personal life, because I think the enemy, for those of you guys who, you don't have the luxury of knowing everything about us, but where the enemy attacks everybody in certain ways, and the way that he always has attacked me is financially, which is so funny and ironic, because it's the one thing that I have to have complete faith in God, because I've never had a real job where somebody just gives me a paycheck. Right. I've had to raise it all, and I've been so incredibly God's been so faithful, and I've had to rely and depend on him for everything, literally everything. And it's still the one thing that will get me every time with the enemy. And so that season of our life was a really, really hard one for finances. And we had to call our board together to do some really hard restructuring of our ministry and just kind of work through some things. And crazy enough, it was a Tuesday. August 23rd, 2011 was a Tuesday. And that Tuesday was the culmination of all of it, because somebody on our board had paid literally thousands of dollars to have a professional videographer, video team come and do a story on our ministry so that we could go and share it with churches and people and raise money. And so I went to that board meeting where they showed us the video for the first time, and it was the most hope that I had in months, maybe even going into years. It was the most hope that I'd had. And I left that meeting, it was late because we had stayed and talked through it, and there was this sense of excitement. And I mean, again, talk about setting the stage. This is the enemy. But at the same time, it's God's favor on saying, I've got you in this area because you're about to walk through hell.
Right. That's right.
And so I came home, and all I wanted to do was show you this video because it was so incredible. And again, it was the most hope that I'd had. And I remember I showed you the video, and you had no reaction. You didn't care. I don't even know if you watched it. You were over my shoulder. And that's all I remember is showing it to you and then thinking, well, that was a punch in the gut because she didn't even care. And then that's when you said, we need to talk. And I'm sure I remember some of these details a little bit better because you were in a complete fog, but we were in our dining room area, which was a study at the time. And that's where I'd showed you, that's where I showed you the video. And so you said, we need to talk. And we went into the bedroom because the boys were asleep. It was late. It was almost midnight. It may have even been midnight by that point. And so just like you said, you sat down on the edge of the bed, over on your side of the bed, and I remember you grabbing a pillow and just kind of pulling yourself up, and you said, I've messed up. And like you said, I didn't respond because my first thought was, was it car? Did she wreck the car? Did she break the washing machine? Those things. Did she spend too much? Did she overspend on her credit card? All of these things. And then you said, I've messed up really bad. And I don't know why, because I never had a real suspicion, although there were weird things that that had happened throughout the summer that I was very uncomfortable about. And a couple of times we even had conversations about it and me being uncomfortable, but never in my wildest dreams did I think that you would have ever been unfaithful. And so when you said those words to me, because you said I've messed up really bad. And although I think I knew right then, like you said, I waited for you to say, I've been unfaithful. And I know that my first question was, who was it? And so you didn't want to tell me. And I was like, well, like we're ever going to leave this room without me knowing that detail at least. But you were like, you might have even said,
it doesn't matter.
That's not important or something like that. And the crazy thing is
because
that
I was in such a weird place. I was trying to protect him.
Right.
I mean, that's so weird.
And it caught me so off guard that I wasn't expecting what you were going to tell me and who it was. And so you told me, and I just remember looking at you, and I think you described it well because you said that you there was no godly sorrow. You had nothing. There was no emotion. And I think that hurt as bad as anything because I looked at you and I thought, you don't even care what you did. And I know that I immediately started thinking, how am I supposed to react to this? Because I feel like that people that have these that are suspecting their spouse of doing something like this, and there are people out there. There are definitely people out there that are like, I have a feeling my spouse is in the middle of an affair, But for me, I never thought that or dreamed that to the point where in my head I never had a conversation of what would I say to you if you confessed that to me, because I never thought that I would have to do that. And so do you remember what I did immediately? You're not talking. You're just crying.
Sorry. No, I do not remember.
Well, I remember I threw something. I threw something against the blinds, and because that was, like you said, I'm not an angry person. I'm very much in control of my emotions, but I felt like that moment warranted me doing something outrageous, but I couldn't even bring myself to do it. And so I threw something, and like I honestly, to this day, I remember, I'm not a big cusser. It happens inside, but it never makes it to my lips a lot of times. But I remember thinking, I need to cuss right now. Like, I need to say something. But I don't remember if I did, because I probably chickened out. And I don't know. I didn't know what to do. And I do remember asking you a few questions, because I asked you how long it had happened, found out that it was, several weeks throughout the summer leading up to that. So that's just to give time frame to some of our listeners. So, I think that I asked a handful of questions like that. I wanted to know, like, you said the words. Again, this is an important part of it. So, but you said the words, I've had an emotional and physical affair. So you defined it, and I knew what it was, which was helpful. But I'm sure, and I remember asking a few specific questions about that. But then I was like, I don't know what's about to happen to our marriage. Like, you were in this place of, I can hold this together. I was in this place of, am I still going to be, obviously divorce takes a long time, but in my mind, when I wake up in the morning, and am I even going to have a spouse?
Right.
And so I left the house, and I went and I told one person. I didn't tell you where I was going, but I went and I called somebody. I went to their house. I told them, and I came back several hours later. And that was basically the night. I do remember coming back, and as I was driving back, you had been texting me wondering where I was. But I knew that you didn't care where I was. You just didn't want me telling anybody. And I think I even remember finally answering your phone call at one point, and the only question you asked was, who did you tell? Yeah, who did you tell? And I think you even said, did you go tell my dad? Like, not my dad, your dad.
My dad.
You said, did you go tell my dad? And so I made it back to our neighborhood, and I remember sitting down.
Which you did not.
No, I did not. That was not the person. In fact, the person that I told, I was trying to protect the secrecy of it all, even then, and I was trying to protect you and your reputation. Because I knew, yes, and because at that point I was like, I don't care what happens to her, but I did. I went and I told one person that I knew I could trust, but that also didn't know us well enough to where I knew it wasn't going to go past that person, like, at all. And so, gosh, even thinking back on that, just how God directed those things in moments where I don't know how I was thinking even a little bit clear. But I want to give you a chance to wrap it up here in a second, but I want to share this one thing, because we're gonna go into more of our story, not on this episode, but we're gonna go into more of our story, because there is a before and there is clearly an after.
Right.
And so, but it's important to set the stage so that people know exactly what happened and who it is that you're listening to, because to know what our redemption story came out of, that's the power of God. So I came back that night, and you were just relieved that I came home. you never said you were sorry, nothing, you didn't care, and none of that. I was never going to lay in the bed with you. I was very angry, obviously all the emotions, hurt, devastated, no hope really. But I went back and I laid down with our youngest son because I knew he probably wouldn't wake up. And laid down with our youngest son. He was 5 at the time. So our kids were 5 and 9. We have 2 boys. And I laid down with him. And as I was laying in the bed, there's a reason that I want to tell this on this side of the story. As I was laying in the bed, I felt like God said, you have permission to leave, because I knew Scripture. And I knew that I could leave this relationship and I could leave with my head held high, because I had not done anything to cause this, or however you want to say it. But I knew I had permission to leave. But I believe that night laying in bed, I heard God say to me, but I'm asking you to stay. And so at that moment was the first bit of hope that I had, because I believed that God was going to be faithful and was going to heal. And so I that was the night that I looked up, kind of long story, and I'm not going to tell it, but I came across the marriage intensive that I felt like God said, this is what you guys are going to do, and this is going to be a part of your healing journey. Now, I say that because that night, God said, I want you to stay. The next 2 days, Wednesday, Thursday, there were developments. We'll talk about, kind of those practical first steps and the things that we did and who we told and, going to counseling and all that. But over those next couple of days, nothing changed as far as your heart.
Right.
But then on Friday, more information came out.
Yep.
The reason why laying in that bed, and this has all been revealed to me over time, but the reason why that Tuesday night laying in bed and listening to God say, I'm asking you to stay. And then Friday, more information came out. And the more information that was when it became public. It was a much bigger deal than what you had told me. And there were more like other things and people involved, all that kind of stuff. It was that Friday was a place that most people would never come back from.
Yep. And
the reason why Tuesday was so important is because when I look back on it now, what transpired over those 3 days, none of it surprised God. God knew that 3 days later you were going to tell me the rest of the story. But I don't know, if I had not heard from God on Tuesday say, I'm asking you to stay, I don't know that I would have stayed after Friday.
Yeah.
But the God that I serve is the same God that told me on Tuesday, you can trust me. He was never going to change his mind and say on Friday, about that on Tuesday, you can leave. Mm-hmm. It was the same God with the same instructions to me. And I'm so thankful and now looking back on it, I'm so thankful that I heard from God before I heard the rest of the story, because I was able to look back and go, this is the same God that's been faithful through all of these years. And what he told me on Tuesday night is the same truth for Friday. And so I was able to walk into the healing process knowing that God had called me to stay. And then that really is when our journey started. So I don't know if you want to tie anything up, put any of the pieces together that I may have left out, but just to finish up on that day, August 23rd, 2011.
Yeah, when you talk about that Friday, because that's when everything came out, every person involved, every relationship, every detail that you could possibly know, and how many people it affected was that Friday. And I'm thankful for that Tuesday, because even on Friday, I wasn't broken yet. And I couldn't help but think while you were talking how, Jesus, if you grew up in a Southern Baptist church, you know this saying, but if you didn't, I'm fixing to tell you it. It may be Friday, but Monday's coming. That Friday was the darkest that I'd ever felt, with zero hope that our marriage would make it. And it wasn't Monday that I was broken, but it was soon after. And even though that was the darkest day that I've ever experienced in my life, between that Tuesday and Friday when every sin was exposed and every unfaithfulness was brought to light, you didn't waver. You stood strong and knew that our God was strong enough to handle what all that had been said and what was coming. And your faith in him, I was able to lean on and see that the God that you served, who said, hey, you have permission to leave, but I'm asking you to stay, that same God was going to carry me. And he showed up in a big way for me. If you don't know the rest of our story, I pray that you will come back. If you get off from this podcast and think, ooh, I need to know all the details, I need to know who it was or how many there were, what all happened, you're missing it. The details, and I get really uncomfortable even sharing the details that we shared today, because I'm tiptoeing on telling somebody else's story for the people who know who it is. And I don't ever want to do that. But I also know that in seeing these little details and how devastating it was, and how difficult and how just morally trash that everything was happening, that if you get caught up in that, you're going to miss Jesus. And the only thing that I want you to hear from this is how big our God is. That even after this mess, we get to continue our story. And so over the next few weeks, where we talk about what got us to the point of confession and then what happens after the point of confession, it's all God's story that we're just a part of. Yeah. And I don't want anybody to miss that.
If anybody's listening, and whatever your circumstance and your situation is, if you just feel hopeless, I just want you to know that there is hope. And the fact that we can sit here and talk about something as devastating as what happened to us on our right after our 15th wedding anniversary, and here we are almost 15 years later, 14 years. We just hit our 29th anniversary, but now here we are all of these years later, and the miracle and the restoration and the redemption that is God's story in our marriage. We want that to give you hope. No matter where you are in your marriage, let that bring you hope today. All right, gang, until next week, we'll see you then.
Peace.
Peace.